For this video, I'd like to talk about multiplying negative numbers. So we have these two examples here, minus 2 times positive 3 and minus 6 times negative 5. And first I'll show you the process, and then we can talk about why the answers are what they are. So when you have one negative and multiply it by one positive, then your answer is going to be negative. You get a negative 6. But when you have two negatives, they essentially cancel each other out and you get a positive number. So in this case, you get a positive 30. But the question you should always ask yourself is why? Why do we get a negative here, but we get a positive here? Why do two negative numbers cancel each other out? And there are several different ways you can think about it, but ultimately to fully understand this, you have to go back to what the definition of multiplication is. Or you need to think about multiplication as repeated addition. So let's make some space. Let's say we have just 2 times 3. So what does it mean to multiply 2 times 3? And remember that multiplication is just repeated addition. So when you have 2 times 3, this is like take the number 2 and add it 3 times. So 2 plus 2 plus 2. Or take the number 3 and add it 2 times. 3 plus 3, which in both cases you get 6. So let's now think about this when one of them is negative. So we could have minus 2 times 3. So it's like take this number, negative 2, and add it 3 times. So minus 2 plus minus 2 plus minus 2. Or you could think of it, take this number 3 and subtract it 2 times. So minus 3 minus 3. Let me rewrite that. And when you're adding a negative, it's the same thing as subtracting. So this problem just becomes minus 2, minus 2, minus 2. And in both cases, you get negative 6. When you're subtracting 3 twice, or when you're adding negative 2 3 times. And so when we have two negatives, we essentially are going to combine both those ideas. So let's say we have minus 2 times minus 3. And so this one is essentially take this number and subtract it 3 times. So minus negative 2, minus negative 2, and minus negative 2. Or thinking about it the other way, it's taking this number and subtracting it twice. So minus negative 3 minus negative 3. And subtracting a negative we know is the same thing as adding. Essentially, this negative sign can also be thought of as opposite. So when you have two negatives, you could think of it as the opposite of subtraction. And the opposite of subtraction we know is addition. So here you just get plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. And for the 3's, when subtracting negative 3, it's the same thing as just adding 3 twice. And in both cases, you get positive 6. So you want to be careful when you just memorize the fact that minus 4 times, we'll say minus 5 is equal to a positive 20. You want to be careful just memorizing this. What you want to do is fully understand why this is a positive number. Because again, we're taking minus 4 and we're subtracting it 5 times. So minus negative 4, we're going to do this 5 times. Or we could have done this in reverse and taken minus 5 and subtracting it 4 times. So let me write that out, minus negative 5, and we'll have 4 of those. And we know that when you have minus a negative, that it's the opposite of subtraction, and the opposite of subtraction is addition. So whenever I see two negatives in a row, I essentially just write pluses for all these, plus plus. And we'll do the same down here. These all become positive as well. And so in both cases, you're either adding 4 5 times or adding 5 4 times, and you get positive 20. So in practice, you really just need to memorize the ideas that, let's say, minus 17 times positive 3, we have one negative, so this would be minus 51. It's like subtracting 17 3 times, or adding 3 minus 17 times. But regardless, you'll get a negative. And then again, when we have two negatives, minus 9 times minus 8, This is like taking minus 9, subtracting it 8 times, and every time you subtract a negative, it's the same as adding, so that's how you get a positive 72. And just one further point to consider. Whenever you see the opposite of a negative number, or when you see two negatives together, they tend to cancel each other out. And one way to make sense of that is if you think looking forward, we can call that the positive direction. So let's say you start facing forward, and then I say look in the opposite direction. So then you'll end up looking backwards. And if I say from here, now look in the opposite direction again, that will bring you back to forwards. So when you do the opposite direction twice, you end up looking in the same direction you started with. And if we called that positive, that's why two negatives essentially cancel out and you get a positive.